Hello and welcome. Today we're going to make Italian sausage and peppers. Now there's two versions of this. One you eat by itself with vegetables and everything, and then the other one where you are generally going to serve it on a bun like a hot dog, and that's the one we're making today. I do have a recipe for the other one, but we'll get to that later on. And as always, before we get to the ingredients, I'd like to thank everyone who has subscribed and you're liking and sharing the videos. It means the world to me, and again, if you have not already subscribed, please do. And you might want to hit the notification bell because YouTube's not quite good at otherwise notifying you. So let's get to the ingredients. For our ingredients, we will need 1 package of hot dog buns, 1 package of Italian sausage, mild or hot depending on your preference, 1.5 tablespoons olive oil, 1 to 2 teaspoons Italian seasoning, a half a teaspoon of salt and pepper, 2 small or 1 medium onion, a tablespoon of tomato paste, 3 cloves of garlic, and 2 bell peppers. Starting with our garlic, we're just going to use the knife and set it on top and use our palm to push on the knife and crush it. And you'll just be able to open it up at that point. That'll break most of the stems. You can do that on any size piece of garlic you have. One of the only things you'll want to pay attention to when you're doing it is you want to be pushing first, obviously, you want to be pushing at the back side of the blade, but also have the blade pointed away from you, because if anything slips, it then cuts away from you and not cutting you. But otherwise, like I said, just crush it down with the back of the knife. You'll be able to peel the outside off, and since we're just going to be dicing this into small pieces, it doesn't have to be clean, and we're not going to smash it since we're not making paste out of it. If we were making paste, we would need like some more salt and a few other things. But like I said, what we just want to make sure is that you're safe. If there's a curve and you can choose an angle where if it's rocket the piece of garlic away from you because it slipped out from a knife versus the knife or your hand slipping, take the garlic. So anytime you get a chance, and you can make sure the angle is going away from you so that nothing comes towards you. That's how you're going to stay safe in the kitchen. So for our actual prep after we peel it, which is also not hard at all, we're just going to chop it up rough chop. We want it to be fine pieces but not consistent and uniform in pieces, because while the garlic itself is one of the prominent flavors in the dish, it's not actually the star of the show, which is why we're not going to crush it. If you want to imagine, garlic basically goes from very little taste to a huge amount of taste, almost based upon surface area and how much you've crushed it. So in our case, we're going to be chopping it because we do want that garlic flavor throughout, but we don't want it to overwhelm the other flavors. The peppers and the onions are not strong enough that if we were to make a paste out of this, that it would be able to compete with that flavor. So that's why we're just going to be chopping it up like this. And you just want to get it in the small pieces so that the garlic taste is there, but again, like I said, it's going to be subdued and it's not going to be the main taste. If you can't get a hold of fresh garlic and you need to swap that out, you'd want to use like a teaspoon, maybe a teaspoon and a half at the very most, just to make sure you get that flavor there, but not the overwhelming flavor again. That would be for powdered garlic. Granulated would probably be about a teaspoon and a half. Now for our onions, all you're going to need to do first is just top and tail them. That just means take off the root and the stem, and we'll do that to both of them. You're also going to need to remove the paper layer and the first layer of the onion, and those are the areas where it's dry. It'll be more stemmy, sort of woody. It'll be a tougher thing, so we want to take off just that outer layer though. You don't want to take off more than that. I'm going to use both a white and a yellow onion because I bought small onions, and that's going to give me a slightly wider flavor. The sweetness in the yellows is more pronounced, whereas the sort of oniony burn is more pronounced in the white ones. You could use a medium onion of either type perfectly fine, and it would not hurt at all. Once we have our onions peeled and separated, I'm going to do another thing that's going to cause a texture difference. Now this is going to be very soft, so my only texture difference I can rely on is the length of it to determine how much of a mouthfeel it has. So I'm going to do two things here. One, I'm going to cut lengthwise, and that's going to give me long, skinny pieces. And then the second set, I'm going to cut along the side like you would normally see it for making any sort of the hoops or, onion rings or anything else, so that you're getting that curved side. Both of these are going to have just ever so slightly different textures, and that'll give us a little bit more depth to our flavor and a little bit more interesting flavor, mouthfeel overall. And you can just do that with both onions. That's what I'm doing here. If you have just one onion, you can just go one way or the other. It doesn't matter. It's just one of those things that you can do that probably no one but you is going to notice. Which is not to say it's not going to make a difference. It's just not going to make a pronounced difference than people would pick up on at first. Textures and things like that really do have an effect on how the food tastes, but they're not immediately noticeable things, because the first thing you're picking up on is the smell and then the taste, and then you get the mouthfeel. Alright, moving on to our peppers, we're going to top and tail those just like we did the previous, which is of course take off the stem, take off the root area, and then we can just slice right down the side there. And you can just use your chef's knife or whatever knife you're using to just sort of cut around the peel, but you just cut that white membrane that's connecting it, and you can pull most of the seeds and everything in that center core area out all at once. And that's going to save you a lot of cleaning, because you don't really want seeds in these style of peppers. These peppers don't have a whole lot of heat to them, so the seeds don't bring anything other than really bitter flavor to the party. So we would rather not have that. Now, other than that, you're just going to cut them, slice them down this way. We're also going to take out the center white membrane on this as much as we can. And again, the reason for that is it has a bitter component. The green stalk, the white membranes, all of the connected area where it has seeds, all of that stuff and the seeds all have a great deal of bitterness to them without anything else. In a lot of the peppers, you'll have a lot of capsaicin in the seeds, so the seed would more choose your heat level. In this case, it chooses whether you're adding a slightly bitter component or not. Texture-wise, we just want to do the same thing we did with the onions. We want to cut a couple of different sizes and a couple of different lengths and widths, just so you have a little bit of a variety of mouthfeel. One of the things you'll note on these waxy peppers or waxy fruits or waxy vegetables is you always want to cut with the slick side up. And that seems a little counterintuitive at first, but the reason for that is that way the food itself doesn't move. So long as you're in control of your knife and you're practicing knife safety at that point, you will never cut yourself while doing these. And by virtue of that, you want to make sure that that slick side is up, so that if anything happens, it's sliding away from you. So the two things you want to do is cut away from you and make sure the slick side is up. Those two things will keep you safe on these, and like I said, other than that, we just want a variety of sizes and shapes. That way we have a nice variety of peppers in there, and that's actually going to add to the visual appeal on these, whereas the onions are going to kind of cook down to an almost not visually pleasing mess, we'll call it that. The peppers themselves are actually going to hold mostly together because of the waxy part, so you're going to see a lot of those. So having that variety of sizes and textures actually works to your advantage here. And if I had thought about it, I would have actually grabbed an orange or a green pepper to go with it instead of two reds, because that's again going to be added to the nice visual appeal to the dish. Alright, once we get our pan preheated, we want to put our peppers, onions, and garlic in there and start sweating them down. And that just means to release the liquid and the water in them. And we're gonna jumpstart that process here in a moment by putting a little bit of water in here as well, and that water steaming off is going to soften our onions and our peppers a little bit, and that's going to help them start releasing their moisture sooner. So that's one of the nice little tricks you can do if you are going to try and sweat some vegetables down. Just add a little bit of water right at the beginning. It'll boil off just fine, but it'll also make all of your vegetables sweat down faster, and you don't lose anything in taste doing this. Once you can see the initial bubbling coming from below, that's one of the times where you want to start looking at your onions. And in our case, the onions, you'll see sometimes they can flex, and if they are flexing, you want to get about, I would say, a third of them to that point where they're easily flexible and you're starting to be able to see through them. And that is going to give us the when we should add our dried spices and our salt and pepper. And the reason to not add it before now is we don't want to cook the aromas and flavors off the Italian seasoning. If you don't have Italian seasoning, you don't actually need it for this. I find it just kind of adds a nice little background note to that flavor as well. And it goes well with, of course, the tomato paste that we're going to add, which is just going to give that hint of tomatoes in the background again. One thing to note is while we're not adding our tomato paste quite yet, you do want to make sure that your pepper and salt are stirred in very thoroughly, because this is one of those times where when this starts to thicken, it's going to kind of keep everything that's in the area, and you wouldn't want a pocket of pepper in your mouth, or salt. Either one would not be what you want. So you just want to make sure they're nice and thoroughly mixed in at this point. Jumping ahead about 5 minutes. So for mine, from our previous one, which was about 5 to 6 minutes after I had started, this is probably about 7 to 8 minutes after that. And at this point, enough of the water had evaporated off from what we put in and from what the onions released, that as you can see this, what I'm scrubbing here is, it's a thicker, it's a fond is what they call it, and it's basically the sort of, it's not charred, but it's very well cooked bits in the liquids. So we're looking for that very specifically because we want that flavor. We want that to start and be down there. So once we get to that part where you're like, okay, this is where we're going to need to stir it a little bit just to make sure it doesn't form too much, but you don't want to continually stir it so none forms. Now this is going to start the first part of what becomes our sauce. That fond, when mixed with our tomato paste and a little bit of water later on, is going to come together and make a thick sauce that just hangs onto the sausages and the peppers and onions. And that's exactly what we want it to do. Otherwise it ends up feeling a little too oily or maybe sometimes a little too dry. When you're trying to get a good fond, you want to make sure you're not stirring too fast or too slow. So if you go too slow, it'll obviously burn, but if you go too fast, it won't actually form a fond at all. So if you listen to this clip I'm going to play, you'll hear the amount of sizzling as you stir. And what you want to hear is some sizzling, and you want to hear it sort of come back from a little bit each time you stir back up to this same spot. So probably about half the sizzling noises you initially hear. So if you listen to this, you'll be able to tell, like, okay, this is still making a fond because we can still hear that slight sizzling noise. After about 5 to 6 minutes of stirring that and just kind of making sure the fond forms nice and gets everywhere, we're going to be able to add our sausage. Now, this is going to do two things. Again, this is going to provide a lot of the fat, which is going to form into our sauce. And of course, this is actually going to add some umami flavor and a number of other things. The taste of the bell peppers and the taste of the onions is going to mix into the sausage, and we want that nice juice to start clinging to everything. So we're going to just take and, as you see here, make sure the sausage is at the bottom of the pan. Now the first time you do this, you're just going to probably use your hand like I just did. It's as long as you avoid touching the peppers, you're okay. If you're worried about that, don't do that, and you can actually just do it with a pair of tongs or a large spoon. What you want to do here is just kind of let it, on the first one, just let it sort of sit for a little bit. We want the sausages to start building up heat on the bottom side, because when we flip them, we don't want that side to overcook and cause our sausage to be rubbery or not pleasant in texture. Once our 30 seconds has gone by and you can start seeing the very outer edge of the sausage turn white, you'll know it's about the time that we want to pile our vegetables on top of our sausages. So the reason we're piling our vegetables on top is not only will the liquid from the vegetables drain across the meat, but it's also going to start adding its heat and start cooking the rest of the sausage. And this is going to give us a little bit of a 360-degree heat effect, which is going to let our sausage cook a little bit faster. Since this recipe already ends up taking about 30 to 40 minutes of stirring, depending on your burner and how hot it gets. Skipping ahead another 5 minutes, we come to the point where we want to add our tomato paste, and that's going to make sure that we get the flavor throughout everything. And we want that tomato paste and our Italian seasoning to both be added at this point, because we can keep some of the flavors that might have been lost if we cooked them a little bit too long. I actually only used about half of my Italian seasoning because I realized my peppers weren't too large, so that's why I said 1 to 2 teaspoons, because you might not use all of it. And after that, it's just keep piling it on and then checking it every couple minutes, and then rotating the center sausages to the outside and the outside sausages to the center. Or you can just stir it and pile them back on and then take care of that later. So let's jump to the very end, because nobody needs to see me stir about 10 more times. Oh yes, almost forgot, this is the part where we add just a little bit more water, and that's going to give us a little more steam cooking and make our sausage cook just a little bit faster. You'll get a little better browning if you don't do this, but it also will take about 5 to 6 more minutes if you don't add the water. After about 3 to 4 minutes of just moving them around and piling them on, you want to start taking the temperature of the outside ones first. And the reason for that is your outside ones are going to tend to be a little bit lower in temperature than the ones on the inside, which is why I actually just moved everything in. I just rotated the inside to the outside and the outside to the inside just a moment ago. And at this point, my temperature was ready on the interior 3. They were both at 162, which meant that with carryover there'd be no problem. But the 2 outsides were just a little bit low, sitting at around 156, 157. So that's just a matter of, like I said, moving those into the right place and then getting the peppers piled back on top. Once it hits the 165, boom, you're done. Just gotta wait about 5 minutes to let it cool, and you are ready to serve. So, as I said earlier, this one is the version that you would find on a bun. It's a sausage on a bun, hot dog type deal. And the other one would be one that would serve by itself. And like I said, I'll show that recipe down the line because it's a little more vegetables and a little more other things in here. In the case of this one, I like this recipe because it's simple, and the main difficulty in this recipe is really having the patience to stand there and stir through all this. The flavors are great. It is a lot of work, though. It's just not a lot of complicated work, so it's kind of that thing you can sort of chill out reading your phone and do. And with that, we have made our sausage and peppers, and oh my god, how did this video get so long? Alright, so I hope you have a great day and a great meal, and I hope I'll see you back for the next one.